everyone. Welcome back to Doorway to Discovery, the WPL podcast. My name is Erin. My pronouns are she, her, and we are so excited to be back.
Hi everyone, my name's Kylie and my pronouns are she, her.
Hi, I'm Shelby and my pronouns are also she, her.
What are we talking about today, ladies?
Historical fiction.
Woo! Sorry.
We're very excited about it. I don't know if you could tell, but
It's exciting.
we have a lot of recommendations for you today.
Sure, I'll go first. Okay, so the book that I'm going to talk to you about is, let me just pull up a picture. It's called Daisy Jones and the Six. So Daisy Jones and the Six is by Taylor Jenkins Reid. And it's a really, really cool book because I feel like we get so absorbed in the mindset of like historical fiction or World War II novels, or something to do with war. But Daisy Jones and the Six takes place in the 70s. And it's a really cool story because it almost reads like a behind the music episode. So it basically follows Daisy Jones, who's like a lead singer, or I shouldn't say lead singer, a solo singer, and a group called the Six. And their whole like PR stunt is sort of like put them together and introduce them to the public as a band. And it's the whole like rise and fall of the band and like everything that happened in between. And it's really cool because you'll get like interview and like behind the scenes and like different people's point of view of what happened. And it reads really fun and really cool. And you get, 70s vibes the whole time. It's absolutely fantastic. And I would recommend it to a lot of people because it's a out of the box historical read. And it'll trick you into thinking it's a real band. Like I definitely thought it was a real band and I had to Google and be like, can I listen to their music? No, you cannot. You can't. It's fake.
They're not real.
It's still really good.
I really love the whole like concept of living in that era and getting to like experience it in such a way of like also getting to do something fun by creating their own band and have their own story. Like it's not like based off of somebody else's. Like I think that's kind of really, really cool concept to do.
Yeah, it's really interestingly written. And like as someone, you all know, as someone who reads a lot, when you come across a book that's written that way, at first I was like, huh. And it was odd because it is written like each person gets their own like font of sorts.
Okay.
So you can kind of like see the voices like while you're reading it. And that was a little jarring at first. Like it took a little while to get used to, but like once I was in it, like the rhythm came and it read so cool. And like the dual perspective of like a same event and like all of that kind of stuff. And basically the whole thing is essentially sort of like an interview and like, oh, tell me about this. And then it kind of like goes back to like their experience. So it's a unique way of writing a story. And I like that aspect about it as well.
And I like that device of using different fonts because I remember I think I was reading My Sister's Keeper by Jody how do you say it?
Cole, Pico, something like that.
Yeah.
Jody.
And I remember starting that book and each of them have a different type. And I was like, this is great because not only do you tell me, but it also reminds me of their own unique personalities and styles. And I feel like that choice is something in itself too, like, oh, like, are you an Arial font? Are you like, you know what I mean? I think like fonts can just say so much about a person.
It really can. I don't feel like people or authors, I should say, I don't think they utilize that enough. Like it's really fun to see. And you really get like a different, essentially a different voice when you're reading.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And there's no confusion about who's talking. Because that's another thing. Sometimes you're like, wait.
Yeah, like you don't want to like flip back to the beginning of the chapter and be like, oh yeah, that's who I'm reading right now. Because half the time, I mean, like I personally can't help myself from reading the entire book in like one sitting half the time. But for those of you who put your book down,
I don't know her.
I have a problem. So no, I love that, and it is on my list. I picked it up so many times, and I really want to read it, but.
It's phenomenal.
Not yet.
I love that it's also like the music focus too that's so fascinating. Like there's not a lot of books that are just like, here's a bunch of fake music that I wrote for this book.
Yeah. No, and that's the thing, like there's actual songs and like lyrics and such like in the text. And I remember Googling being like, I want to listen to this song, and like it's not a song. Like from the mind of Taylor Jenkins Reid.
You have to make up your own.
It almost kind of reads a little poetry, like when you're reading it, because like you wouldn't know what the melody is, but you can still get the vibe. Like she explains it so well that you still like you know how it's going to sound, right? It's almost like Pat Benatar-esque, but that's the 80s, but you know, right? Like you feel it.
I like that.
I like it.
What are you reading, Kylie, or what did you read?
Yeah, so I read the Book of Lost Names. So this is by Kristen Harmel, and this book is a World War II historical fiction. So it starts in 1942 and it continues all the way actually to 1947 or 48. It goes into the post-war era a little bit, but it follows Eva Traub, and Eva is Jewish. She's living in France with her parents, who originally are from Poland. They moved to France, I believe, before Eva was born. So probably about 20 years before the war started. And it kind of picks up right when the Nazis are entering France and starting to arrest Jewish people and take them to camps back in Poland. And so Eva, one morning, she's helping a neighbor and essentially hears a group of police officers arrive at their apartment building and start rounding up people, including her father, which launches her onto this whole escape and attempt to save her father. But first, she needs to get herself and her mother out of Paris. So they end up at a small village, kind of near the border of Switzerland. And it's there when Eva joins the French resistance. So she becomes a forger. Yeah, she starts forging papers to send people out of France into Switzerland. Mostly it's children. And then later on in the war, they start taking other resistance members who have been not captured, but their covers have been blown, or there were even mentions of fighter pilots who have like landed in France. I believe they said there were British and Canadian fighter pilots who landed in France, and they had to like shuffle them out of France into Switzerland. So she's making all of these papers for them, while also trying to make papers for herself, for her mother, and for her father in the hopes that they can get him back. So it is really stressful. It was a very stressful book. There's a lot of tension. There's also some romance. And also this book flips back and forth between 1942 through 47, so the war years, and also I believe it's 2008 is when it starts. It's 2005. So it's Eva in her late 80s is the first chapter, and it kind of flips back and forth between a journey that she's on in 2005 to recover a book that she created, the Book of Lost Names, to keep tabs of all of the fake names that she's created for people. So she made this book in the hopes that she can find the people who she's created fake names for, mostly children, and see them reunited with their actual identities. So yeah, it's sad. It's very suspenseful. There's some romance. It's got a little bit of everything. Yeah, it's really, really good book. It really like kind of tears at your heart because there's a lot of struggle and a lot of family struggle as well. So yeah, it's really, really good. Highly recommend. Very good.
Well, it's a perfect book to show the war story, right? Because a lot of our times when we think of historical fiction, our minds immediately go to, you know, World War II, World War I, any kind of like war typical story. And it does that, but also does that in an interesting way where they take somebody who's like part of the resistance. Like, yeah, they're in the war, they're not fighting in trenches, but they're doing something important to, you know, help people. And also like it's such a huge thing for people coming out of the war. Like this is a really great idea. Like I wish somebody had actually done it so that they could reunite people with their families, because there's so many people who came here and they had to change their names and they have no idea like who or where they come from really. And it's just like my partner's grandmother, she came over and her last name is basically just like the town of where she came from, not her real last name. So it's like, yeah, that's the town's name. I could go there, be 100 other people, but I don't know if I'm related to any of them really. Like
I like the war adjacent story. Like, yes, there is some fighting, and actually I don't think you see too much actual fighting, but you see a lot of the like the aftermath. Like people will come back wounded and be like, oh yeah, I was running through the woods away from the French police who were after us because they found out that we were forgers, or they found out that we were resistant. So it doesn't have a lot of the actual suspense from the fighting. It's just the suspense of like, will they make it out? The stakes are just as high as if they were fighting the war, but it's a very different way of telling a war story.
It's just such a nice different perspective though, like the whole war adjacent, because I mean, like we mentioned, like there's so much war literature, and it's not a bad thing. Like I've read fantastic like World War I, World War II novels, call out the Alice Network, but I appreciate like the whole adjacency, because it's like, okay, but I've read this before, do something new.
Yeah, something very different. And I mean, there's a lot of war stories that focus on either the soldiers or the spies or the politicians, and this was just a random person who was really good at art and forged some documents.
I really love that it's a woman too, because I think a lot of the times we think of the war and we're like, oh, there's so many stories that men can tell us. And not only that, like they do have female stories. I'm not going to say that they don't. It's just they're, again, like they're nurses or they're doing things that like are important. Like none of this is unimportant, amazing, but this is kind of cool because it takes you on a different journey of like the inner workings of a resistance and like what people are trying to do to get out. And I think like it would be nerve-wracking, just like any war story would be, but in a different sense, because you don't know what's going to happen. Like, you know, a lot of war stories you're like, oh, I kind of know what's going to happen, like who's going to make it out of here, but like with these kinds you're like, I have no clue.
No, and it's breaking the stereotype that like women are incapable, and especially the way that they were seen like back then, right? They were so underestimated. And I think that's probably why like they got away with so much, which is kind of cool. Like again, like the Alice Network, they're female spies. And they're like, yeah, I'm going to take this note and I'm going to roll it up and I'm going to put it in my bobby pin and you're not going to know it's there. Hi. And it's just such a great story because you're like, go.
There's actually a few moments in this one where she really just plays on the fact that she's a woman and no one is going to really suspect her of being involved in anything. So she can really play on that stereotype, which is kind of fascinating.
I mean, that also pulls on, I mean, a lot of historical fictions. Like I'm thinking of Alias Grace. Margaret Atwood's Alias Grace is phenomenal in that she's a woman who murdered and like there's a ton of proof, and then she ran for her life and she's still she goes to like a mental asylum, I think, in the end. But
sorry, I was just looking because I have a copy, but I don't know where it is.
I think I do too, but I don't know where it is either.
I was trying to grab it to show.
But like, and then just leaves one day, and then you have no idea, like this is a real person and she did it, and yet they're like, you know what, but I don't really believe you fully because you're a woman. And there's so many great historical stories where women are like, but you should have, you know. Like
I just remember this one scene from that book towards the end where she's basically laying on a lounge chair in the sun, like drinking something, being like, yeah, no, I'm good, I got away with it. Like
I just think it's so phenomenal, like especially that one. And I mean, it's a Canadian story, right?
Yeah.
So if you guys haven't read it, it really is phenomenal. I think CBC did a TV show for it too. That was I think
they did
really
like a mini series, right?
Yeah, they did. And I think it was really good. Like I really loved the woman who played her. It's such a good, wholesome story of murder.
I was gonna say, what did you read, Shelby? Something wholesome?
I think it's kind of wholesome. So I read Amy McKay's The Birth House.
Love that
phenomenal book. Canadian story. I read this a couple of years ago, and so I decided to kind of like, when we decided we were going to have the historical fiction because it won, I looked at my bookshelves and I was like, you know what? Yes, Amy McKay, it is your time to shine. Now, this story is again a war adjacent story, only it doesn't take place on European soil. It takes place in Nova Scotia. Right here in Canada, at the very beginning of World War I. Dora Rare is the main character, and she is the first girl born in generations to the Rare family. And so she ends up, just because of, you know, her life and, you know, having all these brothers, getting really close with the local midwife. And so she starts like apprenticing with her and, you know, has some kind of communication. And one day the midwife goes missing. So she kind of has to pull together what she's already learned about midwifery and, herbals and all that kind of stuff, to help the women in her community, because they're a small town in Nova Scotia. There's no access to a giant hospital. And what they've been doing for centuries has worked. The midwives have always worked. And then one day a doctor comes to town and is basically like, birthing shouldn't hurt. And I know everything because I'm a doctor. And she's like, I don't think you do. So it's just like a really great story of this woman just kind of coming together as a group of women to like really experience childbirth and birthing and having babies and healing and the kind of natural ways that go about it that had worked for hundreds of years, and that kind of clash with modern science. So I really loved it because it took place in Nova Scotia. It's partially really is true. The author, Amy McCry, actually moved from America to Canada into a little house in Nova Scotia. And one day she was digging around her garden, and she started finding like these little like things in her garden, like little utensils and things you could find, and like little like potion bottles. And so she asked like her neighborhood, like, hey, like what did my house used to be? And they're like, oh, your house was the birthing house. Like that's where people had their babies. So that kind of like made her want to write the book, which I also really love because she has such a great connection to the house of these people. And I think it was such a lovely story. The war is there, but it's not the driving factor to the novel. It's
no, it's mentioned like a couple of times. It's like, this is going on, but this is more important.
Well, it also explains like where a lot of the men could have gone, right? Because I think like the majority of the time you really only see women. And of course, like war stories, a lot of the times, like, yeah, women, all the women are left to do everything, right? And because the men are all fighting the war. So I think it's such a great novel about women and community and like people coming together, and then like all of our ideas that surround birthing, and like there are other ways to do it that don't necessarily like have a doctor, and it wasn't always the right thing to do. We're consistently learning, right? So this one clearly is not with the doctor, but I mean, hey, it's like the early 1900s, so
yeah,
I wouldn't trust one either. But it was a phenomenal book. I think it's really great, and it's still historical fiction, but it's not war, and it's about women, and we love women here, so
we do. Yeah.
I love that. I love that there are so many stories just about like there's a lot of stories coming out that are just like, here's the story of a healer healing their entire community, and there's quite a few of those, and I like that.
The ones where they like poison the abusive husbands. Like, okay, I said I wasn't going to bring it up, but I read The Lost Apothecary. And it also kind of reminds me of like Bailey Sari and Aqua Tofana. I don't know if any of you guys know that.
Yeah. Her Monday's murder podcast. Makeup Monday or something like that, right?
Yeah. Monday. Okay, we're not even gonna try. But like, I love those stories too, because like they again happened. Like there were these women who were like, you're having a hard time, there's no way to get out. Here, I'll give you a way.
Oh my God, yeah.
And The Lost Apothecary, as much I did like it. I know not everybody did, but there's this moment where they're like digging in the ground for beetles that they need to like crush up to like make this thing. I don't know, the visual part of it for me was really phenomenal, and like the way that they kind of like switched back and forth between two different narratives. One's in present day and one's back in like the 1600s or something like that.
Yeah.
Really great book that kind of shows you the other side of.
Well, I feel like that's such a valid point. So like I read a book a few months ago that it's not historical fiction because it's a nonfiction title, but it's definitely historical, and it was called Lady Killers.
Oh,
and it's all just about like the lack of research done into like female serial killers. But it was really interesting, and there were a lot of them, Shelby, that just like poisoned their husbands.
Yeah, there are
like 7. But it was also like, it's funny because the author is like, obviously I don't condone this, like killing people is wrong, like let's just flat out say that we all agree that this is wrong. But back in like the 1700s, women were considered property and they weren't allowed to own anything, and they couldn't carry their own money. She's like, so a lot of women were like, cool, I'm just going to marry for money, feed cyanide to my husband, call it a day.
Call it a day. Yeah.
And do it all over again. So they would like accumulate their own wealth that way. She's like, it's wrong, but it's clever, but it's wrong.
There's another book I think coming out that I'm terrible with the title, but I think it's like Amazing Women in History or something like that. I think I got it off of NetGalley as an ARC or a advanced reader copy. And it was just really small, short written things about all of these amazing women in history. And they go from like female pirates to serial killers to like just every kind of woman that you could possibly think of. And it was just really cool because they took like these historical figures and kind of told their stories for the first time. And it was, I'm going to have to find it because I think I started reading it and it was really, really, really good. And I was like, I just want to get to the female serial killer part because like.
So you should read Lady Killers then. I think we have it on Hoopla.
We do. Perfect. Oh,
yeah.
Hoopla. I love Hoopla, honestly.
We love Hoopla here.
For those of you who are out there that don't use Hoopla, but you want your books right away, you need to. Just go out, sign up.
Hoopla is essentially like Netflix for books.
Yeah,
and
exactly what it is.
And audiobooks.
And
graphic novels. There's
TV
also
shows,
TV shows,
movies, music.
We could keep going. Taylor Swift's new album is on there.
Hoopla
has
great,
everything.
Friends.
All right, should we talk about some genre within a genre and talk about historical fiction that ties in some other stuff?
Love that.
Okay, I have a book here. This one is called Passenger.
Yes.
It's by Alexandra Bracken. It's a really, really great book. It's a YA, so young adult fiction. It is time travel.
Yeah.
So it starts in modern day New York. And it goes to essentially any time period and country you could possibly imagine.
Yeah.
They go everywhere in the world.
They go to like England during World War II, I think.
Yep, they do.
And then they're in like Aztecs at some point.
Yep. They end up in Jamaica in I think the 1800s.
Yeah.
They're kind of all over the place. There's 2 books. Passenger is the first, Wayfarer is the second. And throughout the entire time, it's essentially like a race through time.
Yeah.
They're being chased the entire way and they have to find their way to these not quite portals, but kind of like doorways to another time period and country. The first doorway they go through is in the Met in New York. They go through a door and all of a sudden they're just in another country and another time period.
It's actually the first time she travels is really funny. So the 2 main characters are Etta, who she's like a violinist, if I remember correctly, right?
Yes.
Like child prodigy, like she's playing a show at the Met. And she gets pushed down a stairwell and like goes through like portals. But she doesn't realize like what's going on because there's like a whole like thing that's going on at the Met and they're running because they don't know like, you know, is this an attack of some sort? Like what's going on? So she actually thinks she's like tripped and fallen. And when she wakes up on a pirate ship.
Oh no.
And she's like, oh, are they cosplaying? Like what's going on?
Oh my God, I love that.
And it takes her like quite a while to kind of figure out what's going on. And then like the male protagonist, because there is like a lovely love story. By the way, he was probably one of my first major like book crushes.
Yeah, Nicholas.
His name is Nicholas Carter and he's a pirate and he's a cinnamon roll.
We love him.
And he's a really interesting character. And this is a really cool perspective of the book because he is the captain of this ship. And his mother was a slave, and it's like 1776 or something like that. She goes back to, and his father was a slave owner, and he is the product of that. So it's kind of got this like whole race thing tied in, which is really interesting because when they do travel through time, and they do eventually start a relationship, his frame of mind, because she's a white girl, is very different. Because he's like, in my time, I would be arrested and killed for this.
Yeah.
You know, and the further they go in the future, and he's like, oh my God, like I'm allowed to touch her, I'm allowed to hold her hand, I can do this. So that's like a really cool kind of like side part to the story, but it's a really good book.
Yeah, it's very well done, and it hits at a lot of genres. There's the time travel, there's the sci-fi aspect, there's the romance aspect. There is actually a little bit of a mystery too, because they're kind of trying to figure out like kind of why they're being attacked constantly. A lot going on.
Historical fiction, because there's tons of, and it's always like really big points of history. I remember like there's a scene where they're hiding in the subway, like underground.
Yeah, it's during the Blitz.
during the Blitz. So it's like, it does talk about like really big moments in history and how it kind of like fits in. Anyway, it's a fantastic, like, she's one of my favorite authors. Alexandra Bracken can just like rule the world. It's fine. But
she's great.
It's a fantastic novel.
Well, it sounds really good. I have another time travel one that is historical fiction. Of course I do. So it's 11/22/63, Stephen King novel. So this one is different than the typical Stephen King novel that I usually used to pick up. It still has horror elements, and it has a lot of the elements that you would usually find in Stephen King. But basically, this English teacher in, of course, Maine, walks into a diner that he always goes to, and he ends up talking to the guy who owns it, and he's like, like, oh, what's going on? They become friends, and then one day he's like, hey, I can no longer do this, I'm gonna pass it on to you. And he's like, hey, walk back here, there's a portal to the 1950s. And he's like, and so there he's like, okay, I guess I'll just walk through it. So he walks through it. It pops you out in the same place every time at the same date. As one does. So the date on the book is the assassination of JFK. So he comes up about 7 years prior to this. So that's where it pops him out. And so the guy who originally owned this like portal is like, you can do whatever you want with it. I use it to get cheap meat. So like he would like go and buy his hamburger meat in the 50s and then come back, and that's why all this food was really, really cheap, because it was only like 5 cents for like nothing, right? Which I love.
He's like, here's $1, keep the change.
Yeah. So they always wondered why his prices had stayed so low. It's because he didn't have to pay for real food. Anyways, I love that. I love that like little aspect of it. My brain just remembered it. But it's great because the main character decides that he's going to stop the assassination of, JFK. Like that's what he wants to do. He's been obsessed with it. So he basically has to live in this time period until it happens, and like, get all the information, like when Lee Harvey Oswald gets there, where he's living, what his life is like. And so you kind of follow him on this journey of living in the 1950s to 60s, but also like the background-ish story of like Lee Harvey Oswald, like what you think his movements were going up to it, and like what, this main character now has to do to assimilate into, the world. I mean, luckily he's a straight white man, so that isn't too hard for him in the 1950s. But the really sad part is he ends up falling in love with somebody and like has to leave them there. And then he like goes back, and it's just one of those things. It's because like she's alive in the future, so like it's kind of hard. Anyways, I love it because it's kind of apocalyptic. So like there's some things that happen, like when he keeps going back and forth through the portal, or some people start to show up because they notice that he's doing things that are changing history, and you're really not supposed to change history because, weird butterfly effect. But I really loved it because you really just get to kind of experience this person stepping into a time period that they didn't get to live in as an adult, and be like, how do I move through this town? How do I do this? And just kind of like experience it. And of course, like when he goes back to the future, he's the same age, but he's now been living how many years like before. I really liked it because it's historical fiction, but you've got the time period change, you've got like an apocalyptic sense, you've got a bit of a mystery. It's kind of everything. It's a long book. It is, I will warn you, it's a long book, but it's a good one. And Stephen King's a phenomenal writer, and he's going to put a lot of effort into it when he writes it. And I think he did a phenomenal job. And I think that there's a TV show that came out a couple of years ago with James Franco called the same thing. So if instead you don't feel like reading it, you can watch it, because who doesn't love a good James Franco? Yeah, that's it. The end of story. Okay, not anything else, just James Franco.
That's the tweet, James Franco. But I think that's such like a valid point to make too, because I know we've talked about in other episodes as well, like find something that you like and then find it in another genre as like, an introductory. And I think it's really funny because I actually have a time travel book here. We didn't coordinate this, friends.
We like time travel.
We actually didn't. But I also think time travel is a really good foray. I mean, a lot of books are really good forays into other genres, but if you're, I think like us, I think it's easy to say that we primarily read like fantasy and sci-fi, and that's kind of what we like. So when you find something that kind of overlaps and you're like, I really liked this aspect of this book that I didn't normally think I would, it really introduces you to like a whole other genre, which is kind of cool. So the other one that I grabbed off the shelf, which is time travel essentially too, is called Revolution by Jennifer Donnelly.
Okay.
And this is again really cool too, because again, it's a different type of time period. So essentially it's this girl and she's having a hard time at school, and her dad's a scientist, and he's like, hey, you're misbehaving, you have to come with me, like I'm pulling you out of school, this is your punishment, you have to come to Europe with me or whatever. Don't know why Europe would be a punishment, but it is. Yeah. And so she finds so her dad's a scientist and he's doing work on like the royal family, essentially, like I think it's like genetics and stuff. And she finds this journal and that was written by the woman who was the nanny for the children of Marie Antoinette, and it's like King Louis, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. Marie Antoinette and King Louis. See, it's a really long time ago. I'm doing my best. And so she kind of like gets transported back in time and ends up sort of like living the experience of this girl who's the nanny for the kids right when the French Revolution happens.
Not the greatest time to do that.
No, it's not. So she was literally there for 2 days, and then it's like essentially the fall of the French monarchy, like during the French Revolution, and she's living it through this girl's eyes. It's kind of like a magic journal.
Yeah,
but
like Harry
really
Potter.
Cool. But,
steal your soul.
Kind of feels like that. But it's really cool because you get to see this aspect of history that again isn't written about that much. I think in terms of historical fiction, it's still kind of got that fantasy, time travel, sci-fi aspect, which is sort of what drew me in the first place. And I learned so much, like Outlander. Oh my gosh, like who's read Outlander? Who learned all about the Jacobite Rebellion from Outlander?
Yes, I didn't. Yes. I watched it. And I'll read it. Read me for it, but
no. But actually, it's a really good. It's good. Outlander is well acted out. But that's the thing. I was like, oh, I didn't know there was a Jacobite rebellion. Like
that they all. Oh yeah, that whole. I couldn't believe it. I was like, how do I not know about this?
It's true. So like, why not take some, and then you learn a new thing. You get a cool book. You maybe find a new genre. Travel. You wouldn't think time travel.
Another one. I mean, I guess it's the easiest way to access it, right? Without having to be like, this is a full. For us, I think, I don't know. For me, I find it easier to go through a time travel book because then I'm like, oh, it's still in the mindset of me, kind of like me. Like, for instance, whenever we read a historical romance and I pick one up, I'm like, it's really hard to just accept the fact that you're being sold right now, basically. Yeah. So it's kind of nice to be like, this is still somebody who's living in the present, but they have the same way of thinking, but they're put into the situation. It's kind of fun to see them like struggle a little bit rather than being like, typically, I mean, historical fiction, all it has to be in order to be historical fiction is that you're writing in a different time period, right? So, I mean, I love historical romances now, but there are still some times where I'm like, this is kind of hard to read because you have a whole different set of rules that I don't understand, or like clothing. I don't understand a thing. They'll like talk about clothing in this, and I'm like, that could be any garment.
I'm like, what does a bustle look like?
Like what's muslin? What does that look like? Is that like a covering dress? Like, I don't know. So then you have to like sit there Googling it, being like, I have no idea what you're talking about right now. But I still love them.
It gives you like a different perspective, right? It gives you a 20th century perspective on something historical, which is, for me anyway, sometimes easier to connect with the historical aspect too, because you're seeing things through eyes that you would kind of see through.
It's relatable. Easily relatable.
Right? Like,
that's what we're trying to say.
I'm reading a historical romance and I'm like, why are you nervous? Like, relax. It's just a date.
Or like sometimes they have like weird times, like they like eat at like midnight. And I'm like, am I just supposed to accept the fact that you only live at night and you're like, you get up at noon and you're like an early riser for getting up at noon? Like, what is going on? Can somebody explain this to me? Like, clearly I don't know what's going on.
That's the season for you. That's the season. Yeah.
I want a 21st century person to be like, what?
I was up at 6. And I love those stories though, that are like, I'm from a farm. I was up at 6 a.m. And they're like, but it's not even light out yet. And I'm like, yeah, clearly. Like,
cows aren't going to milk themselves.
Yeah. No, I love that. There's so many great options when you're looking at historical fiction that I don't think you should really limit yourself. And although historical fiction can sometimes be daunting and you think, oh, it's just going to be a war story, come to us because we're here to let you know that it's not. And we love talking about books and we love recommending them for you. So ask us. That's what we're here for.
Yeah. And again, if you want to try something new, like, baby steps, right? Like introductory historical fiction, kind of. You don't have to go too far back. Also, like one really cool one that I wouldn't 100% classify as historical fiction, but still has that vibe is Ready Player One by Ernest Cline.
Yep.
Did either of you read that?
No, I have not.
No? It's a cool concept. So basically it's set way in the future, and everything on Earth is terrible. So everybody essentially lives through virtual reality. So like all of their schools, their jobs, their, day-to-day activities, everything is through this VR thing. And the creator of the video game dies and puts Easter eggs like into the video game, and is basically like, anyone who finds these and solves the riddle or whatever wins my entire fortune.
Like Willy Wonka.
Kind of like Willy Wonka, but with video games. But because it's so far in the future, it's like historical fiction in that the creator of the video game was obsessed with the 80s. So everything they have to do within the video game is like 80s related. So like music, games, trivia, TV shows, like whole 9 yards. So it's kind of like, you're not going too far back. And it's like a nice like introductory with something that still piques your interest, but it also kind of like gives you a little bit of a boost into historical fiction. So we can do that for you.
We have some great programs too. If you're interested in finding some new books, you can request a library to go kit. We have them for kids and adults, and that's essentially a surprise bag. You fill out a little questionnaire online, letting us know what kinds of books you're interested in, and one of our lovely library staff will put together a bag for you, and it's just a surprise what you'll find inside.
And it'll probably be either me or Kylie that does it.
Yeah. And then, of course, we have a genealogy club coming up on May 19th. So if you would like to sign up for that as well, it's a great program where anybody from beginners to advanced people who do a lot of genealogy for their families all kind of get together and help find tips and tricks. And of course, currently we do have Ancestry.com for free. You can access it through our library website with your library barcode. So make sure to have your library card with you when you go to find it, and you can completely access Ancestry.com for free. We have lots of great databases if you're looking to, do any of the things that basically Kylie's book did, and like find your family, find where you came from. Like that's what we're here for. We love to help with it. And if you can't make the genealogy club, you can always get in contact with our archivist as well. The archives are a great resource for any of those things. So of course, May 19th, genealogy club, if you'd like to.
So it's your very own historical fiction, or historical reality.
Yes, it's nonfiction, actually.
Ooh,
and historical nonfiction.
Last but not least, we also have Discover Reads lists. So very similar to the book bags, but a little bit different. You fill out a questionnaire, and a librarian will handpick 8 to 10 titles for you, and then send them to you in a Discover Reads list. So if you just sort of want a bunch of stuff to kind of peruse, you can look it up on our catalog. You can see if you like the vibe of the book. These are all really great options to kind of get you to try something new. Why not? Life's too short.
And of course, when this comes out, we will be switching over to a new system for programs in our calendar. It's going to be super great. So you can get a sneak peek from today to the 13th. And then we have our registration for summer program starting May 17th. So you can start registering as of then, but we are going to be switching over. You're just going to get the last little bit of it there, but it's a really great program. It's super easy to use, lots of great categories, great ways to search. So you can now do lots of great things on our calendar to make it easier to find the programs that you need.
Yeah.
And of course, we have digital literacy coming up as well. We have a cricket program that's going to be happening on May 25th. So you can register for that online through our regular calendar system and pick up your to-go kit to create what you're creating in your program before May 25th. From May 10th to the 25th, you can pick those up. So there's lots of great programs happening in May. You really should sign up for one.
Lots going on.
Just one or two. And last but not least, just a little bit of heads up about the podcast as well. So from this month going forward, our podcast is strictly going to be Reader's Advisory, which we've told you before is just a fancy word of recommending books to you and telling you what you should read and what's worth it. So we're switching things up a little bit. We will only be posting once a month now, which is every second Monday of the month. You'll get a Reader's Advisory episode. But like usual, we encourage you to reach out if you have any questions about behind the scenes. Please let us know, because we are absolutely happy to work that into our episode as well and answer those questions for you. And hopefully you keep coming back, and we will see you next month.
Oh, and don't forget that every single thing that we mention in our podcast, from programs to books to anything, will be linked below in the description. So if you want a list of all the books we talked about today, even if we just mentioned them in passing, they'll be on their own list on our website. And then, of course, all of our programs will be linked to below, right to the registration page. So really, you don't have to do anything. You just got to scroll down and hit.
We've done it all.
Links.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Bye, guys. Thank you so much. We'll see you next month.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.